The alien world was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the land itself carried memories of pain. Long ago, this planet had burned in war. Cities once full of light now stood in ruins. Towers of metal lay broken, and the air carried the smell of old fire. The people of this world, tall, silver-skinned beings with bright, glowing eyes, were still trying to heal. They had medicine, they had knowledge, but deep wounds remained, both on their land and in their hearts. Far from Earth, far from human cities and noise, one man worked alone inside a small outpost built near the alien capital. His name was Daniel. He was not a soldier, not a politician, not a man of war. He was an engineer, a builder. His hands had crafted machines for spaceships, tools for workers, and devices for survival. But here on this world he was known by another name. The aliens called him the maker of broken things. Daniel had come after the war, not to fight but to help rebuild. Yet the aliens did not fully trust him. To them, humans were strange, emotional, and unpredictable. Some said humans were too bold, too dangerous. Others whispered that humans could not be trusted with alien lives. Still, Daniel stayed. Day after day he worked, repairing what others thought could never be repaired. And then came the day that changed everything. A small group of aliens entered his outpost. Their steps were heavy, their voices tense. In their arms was a child. The child's skin was pale, almost gray, and its large glowing eyes were filled with fear. One of its arms was gone, torn away in an accident. The wound was old but deep. The healers of the alien race had tried everything, but they could not restore what was lost. Daniel looked at the child, and the child looked back. In that moment, something passed between them. The child was scared, trembling, but also curious. For a moment, Daniel saw not an alien, not a creature from another world, but only a child in pain. The leader of the group spoke in a cold voice. "We bring this child to you, human. Our healers have failed. If you cannot help, the child will live in sorrow. Do you dare to try?" Daniel was silent for a long time. His mind raced. Alien biology was not like human biology. Their muscles, their bones, their nerves, they worked in ways no Earth doctor had studied. If he failed, the child could be hurt even more. If he failed, the aliens might turn on him. But when he looked at the child again, he did not see danger. He saw a small life that deserved a chance. He nodded slowly. "I will try." Whispers filled the room. Some of the aliens gasped in anger. Others shook their heads. One of them stepped forward and warned, "You must understand. If you harm this child, if you play with life and fail, the Queen herself will hear of it. Do you understand, human?" Daniel's heart pounded. The Queen, ruler of the alien race, feared and respected by all. If she learned of his failure, his life would be worth nothing. Still, he answered with calm words, "I understand, but I will not stop. This child deserves to live whole again." And so it began. Daniel studied the child for hours. He examined their strange muscles, their energy veins glowing under skin, their nervous system that seemed to hum with light. He drew plans on paper, then threw them away. He worked on small models, breaking them apart again and again. His tools were simple, his resources few. But he did not give up. The child watched him silently. Sometimes, when Daniel's hands trembled from exhaustion, the child would reach out with its remaining arm and touch his hand. That simple touch gave him strength. Outside, rumors began to spread. A human was trying to change alien flesh. A human was daring to touch what no alien doctor could heal. Some said he was insane. Some said he was dangerous, and some began to hope. Night fell on the alien city, but inside the outpost, Daniel kept working. Sparks flew from his tools. Metal shaped into new forms, strange alloys bending to his will. He whispered to himself as he worked, "It has to fit. It has to move. It has to feel alive." At last, as the hours stretched into dawn, Daniel stepped back. On the table lay something no one had ever seen before. Not human, not alien, but something in between. A crafted limb built with human hands but designed for an alien body. The child's eyes widened. The alien standing guard fell silent. Daniel wiped the sweat from his face and whispered, "It is ready." But before he could attach the limb, before the child could take its first step toward hope, a sound echoed outside. The heavy march of armored feet. The air grew tense, thick with fear. The guards turned pale. The Queen's soldiers had arrived. The Queen's guards did not enter that night. They only left a warning outside the outpost, a reminder that every move Daniel made was being watched. The message was clear: succeed, and the Queen may grant him mercy, fail, and he would pay with his life. Inside the outpost, the room was quiet again. The child sat on the bed, staring at the strange metal limb Daniel had built. Its glowing eyes reflected both fear and curiosity. The child reached out with its single arm, touched the cold surface of the crafted limb, and quickly pulled back. To the child, it was something unnatural, something both frightening and hopeful. Daniel knelt in front of the child. He spoke softly, his voice calm, though his heart was heavy. "I know you are afraid. I know this is strange, but I promise you I will not stop until you can live free again." The child did not answer in words. Instead, a tear slid down its silver cheek. That tear spoke louder than any language. It was the tear of someone too young to understand war, too young to understand loss, but old enough to feel the weight of suffering. Daniel studied the child's body again. Alien biology was a puzzle with no clear solution. Their blood was not like human blood. It glowed faintly like liquid light. Their muscles were wrapped with thin strands of energy that pulsed with every breath. Their bones carried a strange flexibility, both strong and soft. To build a limb for them was not just mechanics. It was something closer to art mixed with science. The alien doctors who had once tried to heal the child had failed. They could close wounds, they could stop pain, but they could not bring back what was lost. Their methods were limited by their traditions, bound by fear of breaking what they could not control. But Daniel was different. He was human, and humans had one trait that could not be measured by logic. They refused to give up. For days, Daniel worked while the child watched. He took apart the crafted limb again and again. He studied the child's nervous system, tracing lines of light under the skin, trying to imagine how signals of thought and movement flowed. He built small devices to test reactions, attaching wires that glowed faintly when the child tried to move. Sometimes the tests failed, leaving the child exhausted. Each failure hurt Daniel deeply, but he did not show it. He could not afford to show weakness. At night, when the child finally slept, Daniel sat alone by the workbench. His hands were dirty, his eyes heavy, but his mind burned with thoughts. He whispered to himself, "This is not about machines. This is about giving life back. I cannot fail," but failure was always near. The first prototype limb cracked under pressure. The second refused to move. The third burned out with a sharp flash of light that almost scared the child to tears. Each time Daniel felt despair pressing against him, but each time he forced himself to rise again. The whispers outside grew louder. Some aliens mocked him, saying the human was wasting time. Others feared that the child would suffer more because of his foolishness. And some began to hope in silence. The child, too, began to change. At first it had been quiet, withdrawn, watching with wide, fearful eyes. But as days passed, the child started to trust. When Daniel placed a tool in its small hand, the child held it steady. When Daniel asked it to move or breathe in a certain way, the child obeyed with patience. A bond was forming, something more than healer and patient. It was trust built on kindness, on the simple human act of caring. One evening, as Daniel adjusted the limb for the fourth time, his hands trembled. He had not eaten all day, had not slept properly for many nights. The child noticed. It reached out with its small remaining arm and touched his face gently. Daniel froze. The touch was soft, almost fragile, but filled with meaning. The child's glowing eyes looked straight into his, and in that silent moment, Daniel understood. The child believed in him. It was no longer about machines, no longer about the Queen's warning, no longer about survival. It was about a promise between two beings, one human and one alien bound by hope. The next morning, Daniel changed his approach. Instead of forcing the limb to mimic alien biology, he began to design something new. Not fully human, not fully alien, but a bridge between the two. He adjusted the joints to move with more freedom. He reshaped the energy channels to carry signals like flowing water. He added sensors that could feel touch, heat, and cold. Day after day, the design grew closer to perfection. Each improvement came with new failures, but Daniel pressed forward. And the child, once weak and hopeless, now sat with quiet determination, ready for the day it could move freely again. But shadows still lingered. Each night, soldiers passed near the outpost. Each day, alien voices reminded Daniel of the Queen's judgment. The pressure grew heavier. Time was running short, and then, after weeks of pain, work, and hope, the final piece was ready. The limb shone under the dim lights of the outpost, not cold like before, but warm, almost alive. Daniel lifted it with both hands, turned to the child and whispered, "It is time." The child's glowing eyes widened. Outside, a storm began to build over the alien capital, thunder echoing across the sky. The test would begin, and the world would soon know if Daniel had succeeded or doomed them both. The storm outside raged through the alien night, winds shaking the walls of the outpost. Lightning lit up the sky, and every strike seemed to echo Daniel's pounding heartbeat. Inside, the small room glowed with soft light from machines and tools. The crafted limb lay on the table, not just a piece of metal, but something alive with possibility. The child sat quietly, waiting. Its glowing eyes followed every move Daniel made. It was not fear anymore. It was expectation, a fragile hope. Daniel held the limb carefully as if it were made of glass. He had failed many times before, but this was different. This was the version born not from stubborn logic, but from something deeper. Born from empathy, from the simple human will to heal. He looked at the child and whispered, "Are you ready?" The child nodded slowly. The room went silent. Even the storm outside felt distant, as if the world itself was waiting. Daniel worked with steady hands, attaching the crafted limb to the child's body. He connected energy channels to nerves, linked sensors to the glowing veins beneath the skin, and locked the final joint with a soft click. Every second felt like an eternity. His hands were skilled, but his mind kept whispering doubt. What if it fails again? What if this is the last chance? The last connection fused with a faint spark of light. Daniel stepped back, his breath held. The child sat still, staring at the new limb. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fingers twitched. The child gasped. Daniel's eyes widened. Slowly, the hand moved again, this time more steady. A finger bent, then straightened. The wrist turned slightly, shaky but alive. The room filled with silence so sharp it was almost painful. Then the child raised its arm, its new arm, and stared at it in awe. The glowing eyes widened with wonder, and then, for the first time since Daniel had seen the child, it smiled. It was a small smile, trembling and shy, but it was enough to make Daniel feel tears rise in his eyes. The guards watching at the door shifted uneasily. One of them muttered in disbelief, It works," but Daniel was not finished. He gently held the child's hand and whispered, "Try to stand." The child hesitated, then obeyed. With slow, uncertain movement, it pushed itself up from the bed. The crafted limb shook, struggling to carry weight, but then locked into place. The child stood, wobbly, unsteady, but standing. Daniel whispered again, "One step." The child moved forward. Its first step was clumsy, the second almost a stumble, but the third step was real, strong, steady. The guards gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others whispered prayers in their alien tongue. For them, it was not just science. It was a miracle. The child laughed. A sound so pure it cut through the storm outside. It laughed and tried another step, then another until it was walking. Not perfectly, not easily, but walking. Daniel felt his chest tighten with pride. He whispered to himself, "You will run again." "I promised." But as joy filled the room, shadows returned. Because miracles always came with questions. One of the guards stepped forward, his face tense. "This should not be possible. How can a human do what our healers could not?" Daniel looked at him, tired but unafraid. "Because I am not bound by fear. I do not see limits. I see a child who needed help. And humans, we do not stop until we find a way." The guard said nothing more, but his eyes showed both fear and respect. The child reached for Daniel's hand, gripping it with both its small alien fingers and the new crafted ones. The warmth of that touch was unlike anything Daniel had felt before. It was not just gratitude. It was trust. But trust can be dangerous. That night, when the storm had passed and silence returned, Daniel sat alone, staring at the limb's blueprints. He knew what he had created was more than a gift for one child. It was proof. Proof that humans and aliens could share something deeper than fear and suspicion. Proof that barriers could be broken. But he also knew this proof would reach the Queen, and the Queen was not a ruler known for mercy. She was powerful, cautious, and feared betrayal more than anything. If she saw Daniel's work as a threat, she would crush it without hesitation. Daniel whispered to himself in the empty room. What will she see? A healer or a danger? The answer came sooner than he expected. As dawn broke, heavy footsteps approached the outpost again. The sound was familiar now, heavy and commanding. The guards stiffened, their eyes wide with fear. The door opened, and there she was. The queen, tall, elegant, her skin shining like polished silver, her eyes glowing like stars. She entered with the silence of a predator and the grace of a ruler. Her presence filled the room like a storm. Everyone bowed. Daniel did not. He stood frozen, face pale, heart racing. The queen's gaze fell upon the child, standing tall with its new limb, smiling proudly. Then her eyes turned to Daniel. The silence was heavier than any storm. Finally she spoke, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. Human, why did you do this? Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. His answer would decide everything. He looked at the queen and said simply, because the child needed me. The queen stared at him, unreadable. Then slowly a strange expression crossed her face, something between anger, curiosity, and perhaps the smallest trace of respect. But her next words carried both promise and danger. Then you shall answer not only to me, but to all my people. The queen's arrival changed everything. The outpost that had felt like a place of hope now felt like a throne room under judgment. Her tall figure cast a shadow across the floor. Her silver skin caught the morning light, and her glowing eyes fixed on Daniel like twin stars that saw straight through his soul. The guards bowed deeply. The child bowed too, trembling. But Daniel remained standing, though his knees wanted to give way. His heart raced, but his voice stayed steady. The queen's words lingered in the air. You shall answer not only to me, but to all my people. For a long moment, silence ruled the room. Then she turned her gaze to the child. The crafted limb shone faintly, still connected, still moving. The child stood proud, trying not to show fear. Walk, the queen commanded. The word was simple, but it carried the weight of 100 lives. The child took a deep breath. Its glowing eyes flickered with nervous light. Slowly, it placed one foot forward. The new limb shook, but it held. Another step followed, steadier this time. The child walked across the room. Every guard watched, every breath held. No one dared to speak. Then the child turned and walked back, a little faster, a little more confident. When it reached Daniel, it smiled again, proud of its small victory. The queen's eyes narrowed. She did not smile. She did not praise. She only stepped closer, her presence heavy, her voice sharp. It works, but is it strong? Daniel hesitated. He had tested the limb with careful weights, with delicate movements, but he had never dared to push it too far. The child was still healing, still fragile. But he could not deny the queen. It is strong enough, he said carefully. Her eyes flashed. Show me, she raised her hand. A guard stepped forward, holding a heavy staff carved from black stone. The queen took it, then placed it before the child. Lift it, she ordered. The staff was taller than the child and far heavier than anything it had ever touched. Daniel felt his stomach twist. He wanted to protest, but the queen's gaze silenced him. This was the test. A test not of mechanics alone, but of loyalty, of worth. The child stepped forward. It bent down, small hands wrapping around the cold staff. The new limb trembled as it gripped the stone. The child gritted its teeth, eyes glowing brighter, and pulled. The staff rose slowly, shaking in the air. The weight pressed hard, and Daniel's chest tightened as he watched. Sparks flickered from the joints of the limb. The child's legs wobbled, but still it held on. Then with a cry, the child lifted the staff above its head. For a heartbeat, silence filled the outpost. Then the guards gasped, some even whispering in disbelief. Daniel felt his throat tighten with pride. It worked. Not just for walking, not just for standing, but for strength. The limb was alive with power, but the queen did not clap, did not cheer. She stepped closer, her face unreadable. Again, she said. The child lowered the staff, then lifted it once more, this time faster, this time with less fear. The staff rose high again. The child's breathing was heavy, sweat shining on its silver skin, but its smile was bright. The queen finally turned her gaze back to Daniel. You gave the child more than a limb. You gave it strength. Her voice was neither praise nor accusation. It was something in between. Daniel bowed his head slightly. I gave what I could. Nothing more. The queen studied him for a long time, her eyes searching. Then she spoke again, her words calm but cutting. You broke the limits of our healers. You did what my people believed impossible. But power such as this can be a gift, or a weapon. Her words hung heavy in the air. The guards shifted uneasily. Daniel felt the truth of her warning. What if others demanded limbs like this? What if soldiers carried his creations into war? His work could heal, but it could also destroy. The queen turned back to the child. She touched its head gently, and for the first time her hard expression softened. You are whole again, she told the child. Remember this gift. Remember who gave it. The child nodded, glowing eyes filled with gratitude. Then the queen faced Daniel once more. You are bold, human. Bold enough to challenge what even my healers fear. But boldness without wisdom is dangerous. I will not end you today. Instead, I will watch. Her voice dropped lower, sharper. And if your work ever brings harm, you will answer to me. Daniel nodded slowly. He did not argue. He knew the risk. The queen raised her hand and her guard stepped back. Then, with the grace of a shadow, she left the outpost. The silence that followed was heavy but alive. The guards whispered among themselves. Some were afraid, some were in awe, and some were confused. Daniel sat down exhausted. His hand shook as he looked at the child, who was still smiling, still testing the new limb by flexing its fingers. For Daniel, that smile was worth every risk, every warning, every shadow of danger. But deep in his heart he knew the queen's words were true. What he had created was not just a gift. It was a spark. And sparks, if left unchecked, could start fires. The first test was over. But the real trial had only begun. The storm had ended, but the air inside the alien capital was heavier than ever. The streets were quiet, yet whispers moved like shadows. A human had done what alien healers could not. A child had walked again, carried by a crafted limb that should not exist. And now the queen herself had seen it. Daniel sat alone inside his outpost, the echo of her voice still sharp in his mind. Boldness without wisdom is dangerous. He tried to rest, but every sound outside made his body tense. He knew the queen would not simply leave things as they were. She was a ruler, a protector of her people, and everything he had done, every wire, every joint, every spark, was now under her watch. At dawn, the knock came. It was not the heavy knock of soldiers, but something softer, slower. Daniel opened the door, and there she was again, the queen. No guards this time, no grand entrance. Just her, tall and radiant, silver skin shining faintly in the morning light. She stepped into the outpost without asking. Daniel felt his throat tighten, but he did not stop her. She walked around the room slowly, her glowing eyes studying everything, the tools, the scraps of metal, the blueprints scattered on the table. Finally, her gaze fell on Daniel. You are different from the others, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. Most humans come with greed in their eyes. They want land, resources, power. You come with something else. Daniel stayed quiet, unsure if her words were praise or accusation. You touched one of my children. The queen continued. Not with fire, not with chains, but with care. Why? Daniel took a breath. He spoke slowly, knowing every word mattered. Because the child needed me. Because no one else would try. The queen tilted her head. Her glowing eyes softened for a moment, but then hardened again. And if the child had died under your hands? If your experiment had brought only more pain? Daniel's chest grew heavy. Then the blame would be mine. I knew the risk. But I also knew the greater risk was to do nothing. The queen studied him in silence. She was tall, powerful, but there was something in her gaze that Daniel could not ignore, something almost human. Finally, she spoke again. You are bold, human. But do you understand what you have done? You have shown my people that flesh can be remade, that loss can be reversed, that weakness can be turned into strength. Do you know what that means? Daniel swallowed hard. He had thought only of the child, of the promise he had made. But now he saw the truth. Soldiers could demand limbs like this. Leaders could turn his gift into weapons. His creation could heal, but it could also make war even deadlier. Yes, he said softly. I know what it means. The queen stepped closer. Her presence was overwhelming, her voice low but clear. Then answer me this, do you serve my child? Or do you serve your kind? The question struck him like a blade. He thought of Earth far away. He thought of the people who had sent him here. Some wanted peace. Others wanted profit. But when he looked at the queen, he knew there was only one truth. I serve life, Daniel said, wherever it is. Whoever it is. Human or alien, it does not matter. The Queen's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes, an emotion hidden deep. Perhaps surprise. Perhaps respect. She walked to the child who was still practicing with the new limb. The child smiled up at her, glowing eyes full of joy. The Queen knelt, her tall figure bending low, and touched the child's head gently. "You are whole again," she whispered. "But wholeness is not enough. You must remember who gave it and why." The child nodded, its small voice trembling but clear. The human cared, when no one else could. The Queen rose slowly and turned back to Daniel. Her face was unreadable once more. "You have earned a place before me," she said. "But a place before me is also a place under my judgment. From this day you are no longer only a man in an outpost. You are bound to the eyes of a nation. My people will watch you. And so will I." Daniel bowed his head slightly. He did not argue. He knew he had stepped into something far greater than his promise to one child. The Queen moved toward the door, but before leaving she paused. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of destiny. "There will be a trial," she said. "Not of machines, but of truth. You will stand before me and prove your purpose, not with words, but with what you create." And then she was gone, her silver form fading into the morning light. Daniel stood alone again, the silence heavy around him. The child looked at him with trust, but also with worry. He placed a hand on the child's shoulder and whispered, "We will face it together." But inside, he knew the Queen's words were more than a warning. They were a doorway into a future where every choice he made could shape the fate of two worlds. The Queen had arrived. And with her, the real challenge had begun. The Queen's words haunted Daniel long after she left. There will be a trial, not of machines, but of truth. Days passed and rumors spread quickly through the alien capital. Some called Daniel a miracle worker. Others whispered he was a danger, a human who could twist flesh and metal in ways their own kind feared. The child with the new limb became a living symbol, walking through the streets smiling with joy but also drawing endless attention. Everywhere the child went, eyes followed. Then the summons came. At dawn, soldiers arrived at Daniel's outpost. Their silver armor gleamed and their faces were hard. They spoke little, only saying, "The Queen calls. The trial begins." Daniel followed them into the heart of the capital. The city was vast, built of stone and crystal, glowing softly in the morning light. Towers reached toward the sky, carved with alien symbols older than any human language. At the center stood the Hall of Judgment, a place few humans had ever seen. Inside, the hall was enormous, shaped like a circle, its walls lined with thousands of glowing eyes. The Queen's people had gathered, filling every seat, their voices whispering like a storm of wind. At the far end, on a raised platform, stood the Queen herself, tall and radiant, her presence commanding silence. Daniel was led to the center of the hall. He stood alone, surrounded by countless alien eyes. He felt their judgment pressing on him like a weight. The Queen raised her hand and silence fell. Her voice carried across the hall, sharp and clear. "This human has done what our healers would not dare. He gave a limb to a child, defying fear and tradition. Some call it a gift. Others call it a threat. Today he will prove his purpose. Today we will see if he is a healer or a danger." A murmur swept through the crowd. Daniel stood tall, though his heart pounded. The Queen gestured, and two aliens stepped forward. Both were injured, their bodies scarred from the war. One had a twisted leg, bent and useless. The other had lost an arm long ago. They stood in silence, their eyes fixed on Daniel. The Queen's voice was calm but heavy. "Here are two of my people. If your hands truly serve life, show us. Heal them as you healed the child. But know this, human, if you fail, you will not leave this hall alive." The threat was clear, but Daniel felt no fear. Only resolve. He nodded once. "I will try." He began with the one who had lost an arm. The crowd watched in silence as he studied the old wound, the glowing veins that no longer connected, the muscles that had forgotten their strength. He spoke softly to the alien, his voice calm. "Do not fear. You will feel whole again." He worked quickly, his hands steady. He had prepared designs since the Queen's warning, creating new limbs shaped not just by function but by harmony. He connected energy lines carefully, adjusted the joints with precision, and whispered to himself as he worked. When the final connection locked, he stepped back. The alien stared at the new arm, its eyes wide. Slowly it raised the limb, The fingers curled, then opened. The crowd gasped as the alien lifted its arm high, tears shining in its glowing eyes. The hall shook with voices. Some cheered, some shouted in fear, others whispered in disbelief. But the queen's face remained unreadable. "Impressive," she said, "but strength must be tested." She gestured again, and a heavy stone was rolled into the hall. It was massive, impossible for one person to lift alone. The alien with the new arm hesitated, then reached down. The limb glowed faintly as it locked into place. With a cry, the alien lifted the stone into the air. The crowd erupted. Daniel turned to the second alien, the one with the twisted leg. This case was harder. The damage was deep, the bones warped, the muscles weak. He worked carefully, shaping a crafted limb that bent with flexibility, designed for balance, for movement. Hours passed as he worked. Sweat covered his face, but he did not stop. At last, the new leg was ready. He helped the alien stand. The first step was shaky, the second stronger. By the third, the alien was walking for the first time since the war. The hall erupted again, voices filling the air like thunder. The queen raised her hand and silence fell once more, her eyes fixed on Daniel. "You have shown skill. You have shown courage. But tell me, human, what will you do when others demand this power? When soldiers ask for limbs stronger than before, faster than before, will you give them, or will you refuse?" Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at the crowd, then at the child who smiled at him from the front row, the first child he had healed. He took a deep breath. "I will heal the broken," he said firmly. "I will not build weapons. I will not give war more teeth to bite. My hands are for life, not for death." The hall went silent. The queen studied him for a long time. Finally she spoke. "Then you are either the greatest ally my people could know, or the greatest fool." Her words echoed through the hall. Then slowly she raised her hand. "The trial is ended. The human has chosen. We will watch him. We will test him again. But for now, he lives." The crowd erupted once more, voices rising like a storm. Some cheered, others shouted in anger. But Daniel stood tall, his choice clear. He had passed the trial. But he knew the queen was right. His greatest test was still to come. The trial had ended, but the weight of it still pressed on Daniel's shoulders. The hall of judgment emptied slowly, voices echoing in the distance. Some filled with awe, others sharp with suspicion. The child he had first healed ran to him, the new limb moving smoothly now, eyes glowing with joy. It hugged him tightly. "You are safe," the child whispered. But Daniel knew safety was only an illusion. The queen had not ended his life, but she had bound it to something far greater, her people's trust and their doubt. Both were dangerous. That night, Daniel sat alone in his outpost. His tools lay scattered, his blueprints filled with new ideas. But he could not rest. The queen's question haunted him. What will you do when soldiers demand your power? He thought of Earth far away. He thought of its armies, its leaders, and how easily they might twist his work into weapons. He thought of the queen's people, still broken from war, still searching for hope. His heart ached with the weight of choice. At dawn, the queen returned. This time she did not come with guards nor with judgment in her voice. She came alone, silent, her silver form gleaming in the pale light. "You have given my people something they did not believe possible," she said. "You gave back what was lost. But you have also lit a fire. Some will want your gift for good, others for war. Do you understand the danger?" Daniel nodded. "I understand. That is why I must choose carefully who I help." The queen studied him, her glowing eyes unreadable. Then she spoke softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "My people once saw humans as greedy invaders, but you have shown another side. You gave without asking for power, without asking for wealth. That is rare." She paused, then added, "So I will give you a choice, human. You may return to your world, carrying only memories of this place, or you may stay here bound to us, shaping the future of my people. But know this, if you stay, you will never again live only for yourself. You will live for us." The words struck him deeply. Go back to Earth, back to a familiar life, or stay here in a world that both feared and needed him. One choice gave him peace, the other gave him purpose. He looked at the child who stood nearby, smiling proudly with the limb he had built. That small smile decided everything. "I will stay," Daniel said firmly. The queen's eyes flashed with surprise, then softened. For the first time she smiled faintly, a rare, almost hidden expression. "Then you are one of us now," she said. "But remember, you are also watched. Do not forget the weight of your promise." From that day, Daniel became more than an outsider. He worked with alien healers, teaching them what he could, learning from them what he did not know. Together, they crafted new limbs, not just for children, but for farmers, workers, and those who had suffered in the long war. His creations spread through the capital, not as weapons, but as symbols of renewal. The people began to whisper new names for him, not just the maker of broken things, but the bridge between worlds. But not all were pleased. In the shadows, voices of doubt grew louder. Some saw his work as dangerous, fearing it would tempt armies to rise again. Some feared the Queen trusted him too much. And far beyond the alien world, whispers of his success reached Earth. Leaders there began to ask questions, their eyes hungry for the power of human hands shaping alien flesh. Daniel knew storms were coming. One evening, he stood on the balcony of the capital, looking at the alien stars. The child he had first healed stood beside him, now running and laughing like any child should. The Queen joined them quietly, her presence calm but heavy. "You have changed more than one life," she said. "You have changed the path of nations. But tell me, Daniel, are you ready for the battles that will come?" He looked at the stars, then at the child. He thought of Earth, of war, of peace, of hope. His heart was steady now. "I am ready," he said, "because I will never stop building. Not weapons, not destruction. I will build futures. That is what humans do best." The Queen nodded, her eyes glowing brighter. "Then perhaps your kind is not here to take, but to give." For the first time, Daniel felt not like an outsider, but like a part of something greater. His choice had bound him to a people not his own, yet no longer strangers. The story of the human who crafted a limb for a child spread across the stars, carried by voices that turned whispers into legend. Some called him a healer, some called him a fool, but to the child and to those who walked again because of him, he was something more. He was proof that compassion could cross worlds. And as Daniel looked once more at the endless night sky, he knew the Queen was right. This was only the beginning. Not everyone in the galaxy would welcome peace. But no matter how many storms came, he would face them with the same hands that once healed a child. Because sometimes, the greatest power humans carried was not fire, not greed, not conquest. It was the simple, stubborn act of care.